Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Thursday at 9:15. So, yeah, on tomorrow night, Friday night, I think it's like 7 o'clock. Osmia, the band I've been playing with a lot this year. It's been a really great journey, and we're going to be playing a show tomorrow in Old Town, which is a little bit above Bangor. So it's like a little over an hour or so from here. We're gonna be playing. I think it's like a house party with a bunch of other bands. House parties are fun. I haven't played any house party gigs in a super long time. It's been a couple of years, but those can be a lot of fun. I used to play pretty decent amount of those kinds of parties, and they're fun because well, they're definitely DIY and they're definitely pretty intimate, and sometimes the energy can be really great. I have a lot of great memories of we used to we played a handful of gigs up at one point quite a few years ago up in Bangor and in Orono with Quantum. We had a couple of really fun parties where we played at these house parties, and I remember one in particular. We played at this big Halloween party in Orono in this pretty nice apartment, and it was wild. It was a wild night, and it was Halloween, and yeah, it was a crazy time. And so there's something fun about doing those kinds of intimate gigs. But this will be our first time kind of doing a gig like that, so we'll see how it goes. We're on the bill with a bunch of other bands. The other thing that's cool as far as with Osmia goes, we it was yeah, last week we started. It was like in September. We started talking about doing some recording, like recording more or less. At first it was kind of like, well, let's like record maybe an EP's worth of material. And the whole thing, I guess that kind of started the idea of doing a recording. This past year, this early, I should say in March and April, we with Osmia, like I joined the band shortly before that, and then we did some rehearsals, and then we did a bunch of rehearsals, and then we went on tour, and all of the shows were recorded in various ways, and the tour was really a total blast. And the show was recorded, and then they had the idea to compile all of the recordings and put out like a live tape or a live recording of all the bands. We got like Osmia had like I think two or three songs on it, and then a bunch of the other bands that played. We got to tour with a Ceremony East Coast, which is the basically the rhythm section for Place to Bury Strangers, which is a absolutely like legendary noise rock band. One of just one of my favorite indie rock bands of all time, and Ceremony East Coast is basically Place to Bury Strangers is a trio, and so it's basically the rhythm section from that band started this other band called Ceremony East Coast, and super awesome people. It was an honor to share the stage with them. And so that after that tour, and then we've been playing a lot of shows, played a lot of shows after that, which has been great. And then they had this idea of compiling, and we recorded, got all these recordings from the tour, and then it was put out about a month and a half ago. And then around that time, they had this idea of maybe doing some like studio recording. So then we had this idea of maybe doing like a little EP, and then that grew, and then we started setting up shop. We recorded it. We started to set up, and we were going to record here at my house, here at my little studio, and then we we set up everything. We got everything kind of situated. Took us a little while to kind of get everything going, and then we started recording a couple of songs, and then that led to the idea of why don't we like record, maybe we can record a full album. And so and so then that was kind of the goal, and then we ended up recording a handful of songs, and then we had to take a long break because those guys had gotten a couple of injuries that involved their fingers, and we were kind of busy anyway, so we had to take a break for quite a while. And these past two months have been just kind of crazy. So I been really disoriented with time and all that stuff. So I like lose track of time and what's happening. And so last week we converged again, and I figured, oh, we're gonna do some more recording, and then we recorded a couple of songs, I think, and then we ended the night saying, well, basically we ended the night saying, or that I said, I ended up saying, oh, I guess okay, well, we'll shoot for next week and finish, keep chucking along. And then those guys said, well, we're actually done. We've finished. We got all the tracks recorded, and I was just like, what? What? I like totally lost track of time. I didn't know. I literally didn't remember what we recorded. I didn't remember anything of the sessions. I know we the second time, maybe second or third time we got together, we did do some recording, but I didn't know what, if we were keeping any of the tracks. It was really weird. And then, so to my surprise, I guess we finished last week, and the goal is to get the album done, because we're going to go on another little tour in the spring, late winter, and they want to have the album done by then. So pretty exciting. I'm kind of excited to see where this whole thing goes. You know, it's going to be about 7 songs, seven to eight tunes. Um, so yeah, stay tuned for that. That'll be out for a while. Won't be out for a while. And anyway, so yeah, I love recording, and it was nice having this set up here at my house because it's really convenient, and don't have far to go. But if you're in the Orono area, or I should say Old Town area, tomorrow night, come on by. So lately, I've been doing. I had this idea of trying to do videos where I'm covering all of the fantastic films of one of my favorite directors, David Cronenberg. So I realized that might be a good way to go. A lot of the times when I'm doing these shows here on Film Fanatic, I well, I'm always thinking. I'm always thinking of different ideas for different shows, and I was doing a lot of music shows the last month or so, and then had some ideas for some new films that I want for some new films that I got to see in the theater, which I usually do anyway, do a little review. But then I was like, you know what? There's so many great directors, David Cronenberg being one of them, and I realized, wait, there's a lot of movies, like just for example, with Cronenberg in his amazing career that I haven't covered, and I have seen all of his films. I don't own all of them, and I thought, okay, that might help keep things organized from my perspective, because a lot of the times, usually when I do these shows, I usually think of an idea like in the morning or sometimes at night, but it's pretty spur of the moment. Most of the time, it's I'll talk about a movie because I usually watch a movie every night, so usually that will usually bring on an idea of what to cover. So I had this idea of doing a bunch of videos where I want to cover all of the films of David Cronenberg, one of my favorite science fiction horror directors of all time. I think one of the most iconic, one of the most important filmmakers, and one of the most influential. So today's show, I'm going to talk about a movie that was a pretty pivotal movie for me, uh, Cosmopolis. Um, it came out in 2012, a really unusual David Cronenberg film. It stars Robert Pattinson, Paul Giamatti, Sarah Gordon, Juliette Binoche, Jay Baruchel, and Kevin Durand. So this movie is such an unusual movie. I think Cronenberg, again, he's known for being the inventor of body horror. I mean, that's kind of what that's like his tagline. He's known in the world mainly from all of the horror fanatics, people like myself, for all of the shocking and disturbing movies that he's put out. I just uploaded a show on Scanners, Video Drone, um, The Fly. I mean, Shivers. The list is endless. So, but he does. He always has. David Cronenberg has a very unique style, and the other thing that I think shows on a lot with a lot of his films is he's worked with a lot of the same crew since like the 70s. He's got this, like, anytime I've seen like special features on any with involving any of his movies, particularly on DVD or Blu-ray, there's been a lot of times where I've watched a documentary or two on that particular film that I've been watching or that I watched, and anytime I've come across interviews with like his assistant director or his effects crew that he uses or his editor, or his, I mean, just anybody who's worked on his film, he's had the same people working with him on virtually every film, and it's pretty amazing. Like, there's every time I've seen interviews with his crew, his film crew, there's like this um, incredible like sense of like loyalty to David Cronenberg and his vision. And I've always thought too, which I always thought was funny, but that like, wow, well, he's gonna, because his movies are just, well, they're kind of insane, and I always thought, wow, he's gonna be some like kind of lunatic to listen to, like he's gonna be some kind of crazy like Charles Manson character, but he's actually a super genuine, down to earth, sweet, highly intelligent guy, kind of just a normal guy, and he makes these really fucked up movies. So, um, and again, like I said, I think he's definitely one of my favorite directors, and he's also I think one of the most influential. And you see his influence all the time. I think the base example of his influence is in a movie that came out last year with Demi Moore, The Substance, which for 2024 was my favorite movie. And really, that's just one example. But this film in particular, Cosmopolis, is a very again, like I started to say, he's known to be kind of the inventor of like body horror, even though Cronenberg notoriously hates that term. Um, he does take big departures with the films that he makes, or I should say, departures outside of the style that that as fans we often think this is all he does. That he always does these really intense films that involve science fiction, horror, body horror, and films that are tackling psychological taboos, death and sex and obsession and all of these things. Like, these are things that we've come to like expect from Cronenberg. But he does, he's made films that are quite different than anything that he is more or less known for. And one of the movies that I did a review on, which I don't think it's up yet. I think I said it to a premiere. One example of that is The History of Violence with Viggo Mortensen, which is it's a very, I mean, it has the violence of what you would expect from a Cronenberg film, but it's essentially a crime drama, and very, very different. There's no horror, or there's definitely no sci-fi influence or anything tied to that genre in this film. And Cosmopolis is such an unusual movie because um, it's the first movie that really made me think differently of Robert Pattinson, who is the lead in this film. And essentially, this movie is 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 him in camera essentially for the whole time, and it's a very unusual movie. And again, he does films that, History of Violence is an example of where it's not. It's something very different for what he's kind of known for as a director. Um, I also think Dead Ringers is another film where he has kind of stepped out of the horror genre. There's been many films, and I think that this is one of those examples. The It's a very interesting and a very different film for Cronenberg. The basic kind of overview of the story is riding across Manhattan in a stretch limo in order to get a haircut. A 28-year-old billionaire asset manager finds his day delving into an odyssey, encountering a host of eccentric characters and seeing his huge financial investments collapse. And essentially, this whole film, and again, this came out in 2012, a very unusual film for Cronenberg, a departure. This film definitely has a really interesting aesthetic. It definitely has. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but it definitely has this like futurist sci-fi kind of vibe to it. But it's not overt. It's kind of subtle, and it's essentially Robert Pattinson riding around in this limousine and encountering these really eccentric people. And most of the shots are basically him in this like giant stretch limousine. And while he is like having all of these encounters, you see that he's a billionaire. You see that he's basically losing all of his wealth, due to investments and kind of the turmoil that's going on in the world, and his whole like world is kind of crumbling around him. And it's kind of a real interesting like character study. It's I think at the heart of this film, it's like a melodrama and it's a character study. But again, totally different than what Cronenberg has done before. But you can definitely see that it's his style. I mean, it is a very dark. It has a very stark kind of view to it or worldview, especially from his character. But Robert Pattinson, again, this was a movie that completely changed my view of what he is as an actor or who he could be as an actor. I always knew who he was as an actor. I'd always seen him. I mean, most people know him or have known him from doing the Twilight series. That was like his major break. And and honestly, that had been the only thing I had ever seen him in. And those films came out pretty early on in his career. There was three of the Twilight movies, and they were massively huge. Um, I'm not a big fan of those movies. I think they do have they do get shit on quite a bit, and I think there is a fraction of people out there that don't take Robert Pattinson seriously as an actor. I think it's changed, but for a long time, people always thought, well, he's just kind of like this bubblegum pretty boy who makes these kids, vampire movies, and that there's no real depth to him. It's all like, you know, just that he's just a pretty face. But when I saw Cosmopolis, this movie, I didn't even recognize him. This was the first movie I had ever seen him in outside of the Twilight movies, which is wild. And it came out a few years after those movies, 2012, so quite a few years ago. And after watching Cosmopolis, I was just like, my reaction was like, that was a really unusual movie, really cool movie, and I was just blown away by Robert Pattinson's performance. I mean, Cronenberg again. so iconic, and he's a very popular actor. I still hear people talk about him all the time and some of his iconic films. But this film, I never hear people ever talk about, and I never hear anybody really. Robert Pattinson has really grown into something that, as an actor, he's really gone into some incredibly special places. I mean, with some of the movies that after this movie that he was in, he really blossomed. I think as an actor, but I think and I think it's changed his perception. But a lot of people, I wouldn't say myself included, because I didn't think the Twilight movies were as bad outside of the kids or the younger people that really love those books or love those movies. I don't think that those movies were as bad as people said. Outside of that world, so many people were critical and really trashed them. I don't think they're as bad as people say. I think there's far worse movies. But I always thought he was an okay actor. I never really paid attention to him after that. But when I saw Cosmopolis, I was just like, who is this guy? What? This is the same guy? I remember my reaction was like, wait, this is the guy who was in these kind of teeny bopper vampire movies? Like, what? Because he shows so many different shades as an actor. I mean, he's very menacing. He's very vulnerable. He's very human. He plays such an incredibly complex character in this movie, and it's very subtle too. And I couldn't. His performance in this movie really changed, completely blew my perception away of who he is as an actor and as a person. And surprisingly, I never hear anyone really ever talk about this movie, because Robert Pattinson has grown to become a very big actor and has gotten to be in some movies since Cosmopolis that have become really, really huge. I mean, I mean, he's been in many films. He's kind of gone down that a, a, um, definitely a different kind of detour of a road. He could have been this kind of glamour boy actor and just kind of went down this road of playing more or less the pretty boy or what have you, and play these films and star in these films that are kind of lighthearted dramas or what have you. But he's gone on to like creatively take lots of chances, and I think he is such a chameleon as an actor, and he really can do anything. Um, it's pretty wild. And he was in a Christopher Nolan movie, which I can't remember the name of it, with Kenneth Branagh, that was not very good, but he was really great in it. I do think he is one of those actors that can act his ass off and be in a movie that is not very good. He's always, everything I've seen him in, he's just fantastic. And he is my favorite Batman. I mean, he did the Batman with Matt Reeves a few years ago, and the Batman, for instance, is my favorite, or Batman, the character of Batman is my favorite comic book character of all time. And for years and years and years, like millions of other people, the Christopher Nolan films were my favorite kind of big screen adaptations. The Dark Knight, of course, with Heath Ledger, and Batman Begins, obviously starring Heath Ledger, and for the Dark Knight, and of course, you know, um, Christian Bale, and I've always been, ever since I was a kid, the biggest. Batman is still my favorite comic book character hero, and I, also really love the Tim Burton films, especially the first one. But I remember when Robert Pattinson took on the role of playing the Batman when it was announced. He suffered a lot of backlash as an actor. People were like, "What? Like that's a joke," like he's not really that great of an actor. He's a pretty boy, and he's like all of this stuff. He doesn't have the experience. But after seeing Cosmopolis, and I think I had seen one other film, like a smaller independent film with him that I actually really liked a lot. I was excited. I was like, wow, like that is an interesting route to go with this character. And and then the Batman eventually came out, and to me, for me, being a massive Batman fan, it's the best Batman movie that there is, and I that's really due to Robert Pattinson. And then another film he did before that, which is just an astounding testimony to his acting ability, is The Lighthouse. That movie is just fucking gonzo crazy. Robert Eggers, amazing film. And he's gone on to do lots of smaller films, smaller budgeted films, a lot of indie films. But it really was Cosmopolis that really gave me, made me stop in my tracks and take a deep interest in him as an actor, because I was like, this guy is serious. Like he's got all he. I think he can. I think he's one of my favorite like modern. Well, he is. He's one of my favorite modern day actors, and I think he is also such a chameleon. He really can do anything. He can be in action. He can be in drama. He can be in horror films, science fiction. He was in Mickey 17 recently, which is not the greatest movie. I was a little Hung Po Joy was it was his last film. I was not really a big fan of that movie, but he was great in it. He was really good in it. He's pretty fantastic in that movie. And again, I was enamored with him as an actor ever since I saw Cosmopolis, and that's due to the amazing ability that Cronenberg has as a director. Just amazing. So yeah, Cosmopolis, definitely check it out. It is a very unusual movie. It is definitely a departure for as far as any film that we have really gotten from David Cronenberg. But it's really good. It's really good. It's really interesting, and it really, again, it really was an important movie for me, with really looking at Robert Pattinson in a new light and seeing, wow, this guy is a serious actor. I mean, he's got, I mean, even like Lighthouse, for instance, to see him go toe to toe with one of the greatest generational actors, William Dafoe, when it's essentially just the two of them for the entire movie, is a feat in itself. Not many people can hang with Willem Dafoe in that kind of setting, and he totally, yeah. But such a great film. So definitely check out Cosmopolis if you're, you know, wanting to see something really unusual in a Cronenberg way, but yet not a typical Cronenberg way. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.